what first drove your interest in the art? So tell us the word or phrase that comes up for you, and then just tell us, how did you get started? What first drove this passion?
Thank you, Angelina. I'm Melle Hock. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Edelman. I'm also co-founder of ARTNOIR. It is an amazing collective with 7 co-founders who started off really as friends. I like to say about this, like, we wanted something to do that was more than just going out to drinks and having food together. And we all had a passion for the arts. We all kind of were creative industry adjacent or in the art world, and it grew really organically. And I'm glad that I also get to answer the question. I tried not to change my answer because you guys had such good ones. I was like, oh, I should say that, or I should build on that. But the first thing I thought about was when I think about art, the arts, is value and values. And when I think about value, and this is going to go to your question about how I became interested, I guess, like when you grow up in New York, right? You can be walking down any given street and you'll see, the most amazing, like, graffiti art, amazing thing, like, on the outside of a building. And then you'll walk 2 more steps and you'll see, like, a glass wall with, like, more amazing stuff inside the building. And somehow the stuff that's on the outside of the building, like, doesn't have value, gets to be torn down and is seen as like a blight. But the stuff that's inside the building is like, it's a wealth generator. And, so I've always been really interested in 2 things. One is, like, how do we place value on things that are intangible? Who gets to decide what that value is? Who gets to keep and build on that value? And then also, like, what does it take? And I stole this from, like, Virgil, like, if you can't, like, is it like you can change the object or you can change the environment around it? And, like, actually value is created when you change the environment around an object, even more than when you change the object itself. So I get, this is like all things that I like to think deeply about. Like, when I was looking into the sky, I'm like, isn't that interesting? So that just being in that environment really unlocked my interest.
Thank you so much. And tell us also just a little bit about what level of career were you in when you first became a collector? And how did building this relationship with your art passion play a role also in your career trajectory and your growth now where you sit as a senior executive?
So I don't think I called myself a collector until, like, maybe 6 months ago. Like, I've bought artwork and I, like, have artwork and I have, like, multiple pieces of artwork. So I guess I have, like, a collection and I collect that I therefore am a collector. But I thought that title was, like, really intimidating. And I was like, well, I'm not a real collector. Like, I just have this stuff, right? Or I just, like, I just, like, got this stuff from a few friends of mine. So I recognize, like, that title is very intimidating. And it's like being, like, a writer, or, like, there are certain titles that we are afraid to give ourselves sometimes. And I think I only started calling myself a collector just, I don't know, maybe for, like, something we had to do through ARTNOIR on Instagram. I was like, I'm a collector too. And it sounded weird at first, but I've gotten more comfortable with it. But I don't think I moved through the art world, like, with the mindset of I am a collector, although I do collector-like things. In terms of the where I was in my career, I would say that my art career grew very much alongside my professional career. Like, I started out young, thinking I knew everything, but having absolutely no idea what I was actually doing, and, like, kind of knowing that I didn't really know, but not wanting anyone else to know how little I knew, right? I think that's, like, the hallmark of a novice. It's like you don't know a lot, but you really don't want anyone else to know how little you know. Then when you get a little further along, you're like, I don't know anything. And, like, I'm just going to, like, that's my intro. Like, I'm going to lead with, I don't know anything. Tell me everything. So I started really, like, I guess young, like 22, going to Art Basel, and just, like, there'd be like 5 of us sleeping in one hotel room because it was totally inaccessible and too expensive. But we knew we wanted to be there, and we just, like, kind of get on lists and jockey around, and I learned how to not be afraid to ask people how much things cost. That was a really big thing. I was like that was my first milestone. Like the first barrier I broke was learning to be comfortable asking people how much something costs. And that's like, it's scary to even say still a little bit. I remember I'm like going right back to that moment. So I started young and started to ask about value and put my own value on things too.
You just unlocked a childhood memory for me because I grew up in Bed-Stuy and then Canarsie, Brooklyn, and got a scholarship to a private school. And I remember sometimes I'd walk down Fifth Avenue with some of the girls, and they would go shopping, and I would wait outside because I didn't feel like I could go inside the Gucci store. It was like I felt some ways and like they'll check my bank account and know that there's nothing there if I even step my foot inside. And so I'm gonna go up. Yeah, and that's I think initially what some of the experiences felt like when I was trying to engage with the art. So I loved that someone brought up the inaccessibility of it. So then how did you get from that place to your first acquisition? What was, if you can't remember the first one, maybe some of the early acquisitions, and how did you get to that place where you built up that internal confidence to make the ask, how much is this? And I want this.
Okay, so my first two like value generating experiences in the arts, I have a good friend. He's a photographer. His name is Jonathan Mannion. He's done like all of Jay-Z's album covers, like DMX's album covers, like The Bathtub of Blood, all those things. Very, very dear friend to me. And he was doing a solo show at Milk Gallery. I must have been like 25 at the time. We had met. He knew I was in PR, like fledgling, like eyes bright, full of hope and passion and energy. And he hired me to do the PR for his first solo show at Milk Gallery. And I did it because he was my friend. And but through that, he gave me a couple of prints from the show. And I'm going to circle back to a story about that that's really great. And then my second experience was through that. I was hired by a British painter named Charming Baker, to do the PR for his first show in New York. And I did that, and he like gave me a couple of like artist prints as payment, as well as like some money too. I was like, thank you. And so I just did that. And then it was maybe 6 years until my next experience that was actually like value generating for myself in the arts, which was when I bought my first piece. So I bought my first piece from Marian Ibrahim at 154 Art Gallery in New York, Art Fair in New York. It's a piece by a photographer named Jean-Claude Machette, and he's a French photographer who traveled to Chad and basically embedded himself for years with this tribe in Chad that doesn't show like anyone their historical practices and all of the ritual they do around fertility. And they wear these incredible masks and costumes, and they do all these dances. So it's a photo piece of two eldermen in the tribe in full costume guard. And it was just arresting when I saw it. It was colorful. It was serious. There was stone. There was pink. There was blue. I just connected with it immediately before knowing anything about it. And I kept coming back to it. I kept coming back. It was $3,500. I just looked at we're talking about breaking down barriers, price. We'll take that out of it. All right. And it was the most money I'd ever spent on anything in my entire life. I had never, not even my rent, right? Not even my rent was $3,500. I was like, this is like months of rent. At the time, it was like 4 months rent. And I was like, I can't believe I'm going to buy this. That was my first, I was like, I can't believe I'm going to buy this, because I knew I was going to, but it was unbelievable to me. I was about to spend that much money. Before I even spent it, I was like, I can't believe. I was mad at myself, but I did. And the thing that tipped me over the edge, my good friend and co-founder, Larry Osei-Mensah, he said to me right after I swiped, because I was about to be like, give it back. And he said, Melle, don't worry. You didn't lose the money. You just hung it on your wall. And I was like, thank you. Thank you. So that I think that every time like I'm about to like do something, I'm like, I can't believe I'm about to buy this. I say to myself, it's okay. I'm not spending the money. I'm just like hanging it on my wall. I'm just putting it on thing. I'm just like, so I am just holding it for the next generation. I wanted to, so that was my initial thought and how I got over that early hump. Since then, I have like greatly, I like to think, started to mature in my approach to collecting and in my approach to like even like understanding myself of why it's important to me, and helping me develop that narrative for myself to guide how I'm investing, and as well as to be really specific and intentional with what I want to do with that part of my life.
I have two more questions for this part, and then I do want to turn it back to the folks that are with us. So the first one being, you spoke a little bit about this theme of when you're really, really a novice at something, that you almost have to prove that you know a lot, and then you unlock like that next chapter and you're comfortable with not knowing. So that's been a little bit about your experience in the arts. How has that also shaped you in your career as you've gone to this C-suite senior executive level?
I was thinking about this a lot because so Angelina made a connection between my professional career and my art career that I don't often speak about and I don't often make. And I thank you for that, for seeing that and for bringing me to this space, which is usually all about professional life to me, and inviting me to talk about this. So I just wanted to make sure I say thank you, because there is so much connection between the two. So to me, like one of the great things about going to art fairs and being interested in art, almost obsessed, like, is that you get to look at a lot of stuff. Like I look at a lot of things. I look at a lot of work. And it's the same thing in my professional career. Like as a CSO, I get to look at like 10 creative teams work 10 times a day. So, and then being a CAN, you're exposed to so much, the best of the best, award-winning, award-worthy work. And so what happens with that is that you get to develop like taste, right? I'm like, I can look at something and like more often than not be like, that's good. Or like, that's different. That's unique. Like never seen that before. Oh, that's interesting. That's referencing this. Oh, I remember when someone did something like that. So I'd say my professional taste is far more developed than my art world taste, like where I can look at something and be like, oh, that's interesting. You should push on this. I can't like look at every artwork and be like, oh, that's interesting. You should make it more blue, right? Like that's not my role. But I think that it is so important to just like feast your eyes on as many things as possible so that you can figure out what you like, and then maybe start to ask yourself why, and also start to see the connection and trends between things, to see like where it fits in a conversation.
Thank you for that. And then the second question before we bring you all back into the conversation is just around, you talked, and we've all kind of touched on it a little bit, this theme of how it can be unattainable. That $3,500, which I'm sure was many years ago, can still feel really unattainable today to many of us. So how did you wrap your mind around that? And let's say you're maybe not at the $3,500 level yet. How do you encourage, and the community you've built does such a great job of this, others to still engage and still feel, even if I'm not collecting or I'm not ready to yet, I can still make this space accessible to me?
So everything's too expensive when you can't afford it. Everything. Like the pieces I want now, I can't afford. Like there's always, I think it's important just to like have that perspective that no matter who you are and what you make and what you have, there is always going to be stuff that's out of reach that you really, really want. So that's one. I actually think that really helps me to be like, I'll tell you guys a story. I was living in this great duplex apartment. This was like when I was probably paying like $800 a month for rent. Great duplex apartment in Bushwick. And the apartment next to it, which was a mirror, same duplex apartment, was going on like a fire sale for like $350,000. This was a long time ago. And I was like, wow, that's so inexpensive. If only I had the money. And a really smart person in my life was like, it's not inexpensive if you can't afford it. He was like, you're always gonna like. He's like, you can't. It's not like that's just not your market. That's just not your market. Like you're not in the market right now. And it was like a really difficult thing for me to hear. And it took me like years to actually understand what he meant. So I don't know. I can't say more about it, but it's a helpful principle to be like, oh, this is my market. This is my lane. Everything above that, I can't necessarily afford, but one day I might be able to. And I want to start to like know what I would want when I'm in that market. So I do believe that there is a market at like every single price point when it comes to buying things that move you, that you want to live with and potentially like pass down or have conversations around, or like any of the many things that people do with their collections. So I would say like, don't be like, don't believe the hype, right? Don't buy into too much of the hype that it's only good if it costs more money. And it's only good if it's like if it's sold by this certain gallery, or it's only good or only interesting if it's like on a certain wall behind a certain amount of glass. Because again, like I think having taste is about understanding, like you can see the thing on the outside of the building equally as you can see the thing on the inside of the building. And like when you're able to put everything on that flat a plane, you're like, you buy things that you love. You buy things you love. Like, and it does not matter how much it costs. And if you're only ever ascribing value to things that are expensive that someone else said is valuable, I honestly feel like that's how, as a community, we lose. Like as a community, we lose when we wait for someone else to say something valuable before we see it as valuable. So like the thing I pride myself on the most is being able to see something as valuable because I like it before someone else says that it's valuable because they like it. And and just remember that, like, whenever you feel intimidated, be like, I don't like that anyway. Like it'll help, like, so, and when you do love something, be like, oh my God, it's amazing. How much is that? Like, if you just do those two things, you really never know where it's going to lead you in terms of your confidence, your collection, and like, because every price point, like walking down the street, like people are selling the little things, like you'd be like, okay, that's probably an art scam. I know that you didn't actually paint that, but maybe right next to that person, there's like something you really love. So, and you hear all these crazy stories about people buying stuff that then it like ends up being whatever or blowing up. I pay attention to that because I'm like, that's about just being able to connect to something and like acting on it. So, do that and it will lead you good places. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yes, I'm like learning though and taking so many notes in my mind. One thing though I want to do is have us just take a moment for reflection internally. And so I'm going to give you all about 30 to 60 seconds. We talked about a lot of different themes here already, just in these few minutes. We talked about the theme of breaking barriers and creating access or making things accessible to ourselves. I also heard a lot of elements in just building self-awareness and comfort with what we don't know. And then also just values and discovering our values. So I want you to just think about that. I want you to think about a time where you've broken a barrier, and what did you discover about yourself as you were doing it? So take a couple seconds, minute to reflect, and then I want to hear from you. Anyone want to get us started?
I think for me, and I think I would tune out a bit, but your question was
breaking barriers. And so I can think of so many barriers that I've broken in my life. Going from putting myself through college, being a teenage mom, raising my kids, it's so many that I'm breaking every day. But being here is a barrier that I'm breaking, seeing a missing gap in wanting to bring creativity to display, creating an activation where I'm giving creatives that's not represented a platform, whether it's art, fashion, all of the behind the scenes creativity that they don't necessarily look at. So for me, I think this one is by far the biggest that I've done. It's probably one of the hardest things I've had to do as well. And again, I raised 2 kids on my own, so that's saying a lot. So yeah, I think, I continue to do that, and I'm pretty sure I have a lot more married.
And then just a follow up there, what are you discovering about yourself as you continue to break these barriers?
So much. Well, I think with this particular accident, it's learning that like I brought lots of there. I know that, it's dead. It's kind of like waited. And it's truly difficult now 2 years after the one that so I think but it takes that back slowly find that it's activated. It's what we have to do. And it's do it. So so important that they catch they
You said something earlier about like asking specifically about like prices. I think like for me, being an artist, you go from just like off the train and like deliver groceries in the city, and I then became an artist and like started selling my artwork for like expensive prices to the point where I actually would feel nervous to tell somebody what the price of my work was, and like I think the barrier of like kind of accepting. Also, I didn't go to school for art. I plan on trying to be a visual artist. I just lived in New York City. You guys are in the city, you're just kind of like exploring the city, finding yourself and like falling into things. And I do believe I kind of just fell into being an artist, but I've had to now accept that reality. And I think when you think of like somebody being an artist, it's like, yeah, I do that, but I also, funny enough, I actually thought I'd be doing like strategy and marketing stuff. I studied communication. I always love like really good campaigns, and I was like, oh, I want to like make commercials and like win awards for them. So
not too late.
Yeah, no,
We got it all.
I like that.
Yeah.
So like even being here, I plan on being here while this was going on. I just happened to do residency here, but now it's like, oh, this is like my like secret also. Where I'm like, oh, I can get like my like corporate kind of like marketing, advertising stuff off, and I don't know. I think that is also something I'm gonna have to break through and be like, hey, I can also do this, or like you can be like a high and like do multiple things. So I don't know. That's been something I've had to build up to, and like building confidence and like really filling my position.
I think for me, I have always had an interest in creatives and like acting and drama and those sort of things. But I think for many African Americans, based on like some of the norms that we create from a socioeconomic status, it was important for me to start my career in corporate America. So I started in finance, and that's where I got my initial sort of jumping off point. And most recently, I've transitioned into more of a creative role, working at an agency and kind of being a part of these environments now. And I think when I initially started, what I love about creative environments is that they don't really give a shit like what your background is. It's like either you like found yourself because you were discovering in New York, or you figured out how to like raise kids and like really, make all those things happen. And my Wall Street background wasn't necessarily the connection point for why I was able to maneuver into the creative space. However, I did use my strategy of banking to kind of like navigate where I am now. So I started as an account manager, just working accounts and like building relationships, to now heading up all of our accounts division in less than a year. And so it's been a really great journey for me. And I think what I learned about myself is I'll continue to figure out what that secret sauce is and make it.
Okay, tough that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I had like something profound to say, right? But I don't know. Like, I think I've existed in the space of great privilege, right? So I think my learning is stepping into that and not being ashamed of that and being afraid of that. Like, I've had access to all the things. I did go to private school, went to Paris at 16 for the first time. Like, I did all these things, but I was often ashamed of like that privilege, because you're not allowed as a Black person like to express that you have privilege and sit in privilege. Everything has to always be from the glass half empty versus half full. But I've always had a very glass half full life and experience, and that's always been reaffirmed by my family and friends. So I would often hide the opportunities to have access to things or to buy something more expensive because I didn't want to show off or come across as showing off. So like, that's been a really interesting learning experience for me, to shift the environment that I'm in. So I'm the object in the wrong environment. So I took myself out of that and put myself in spaces that was not judgmental, that was not making me feel less than, and allowed me to be expressive and say those things, right? Nobody sitting here when I said I had great privilege was like, oh my God, you had great privilege. Like, y'all like, okay, right? Good for you, right? And that's the space I wanted to be in. So like, I had to make that choice to make myself the object on the outside versus the object on the inside. So, and I just love being in spaces that are always learning situations. And I guess to kind of bring it around, I try to bring people that maybe have less access into spaces I do have access in. And I get great pleasure in seeing them like, oh, I didn't even know about this, or you did that, or like, oh, this house got a pool, like those sort of things. Like, I think that's so great to like gift that experience to someone else that I took for granted for so long of having. So it's my piece.
So many great learnings here, and I hope we all feel in community, because we're all breaking barriers in our lives in some ways, whether that's an internal barrier or something outside of us. Melle, one of the things that you said earlier was that you struggled at first to even name yourself a collector, but the reality is you're a leader in the world for art collectors. You are. And you're also a leader. You've helped me even feel more settled into my journey, and I really do appreciate that. So as you have moved from this space to am I a collector to also sitting in this leadership role in the art space, what are you discovering about yourself as you break this barrier?
I just had like 4 involuntary twitches in my body as you were saying that. Like, so I learned, I'm still learning, that I have a natural, I'll say it positive, I have a natural comfort with being an underdog. I have a natural comfort with being like just outside, pressing my nose on the glass. And it gives me so much, just energetically and musically, like the music I like to listen to, I'm like, hip hop raised me. Like, I really get a lot from that. And so what I've had to learn, and the barrier I'm still breaking, is what does that mean in a context where you really are the leader? Like, it's like, that's all good. We know you're the underdog and all that's true, but actually you are the leader. And actually like these like 65 people are looking to you to lead them. And actually like the position you're in gives you a privilege of being able to communicate, in a different way to people who need to understand and want that same access, like want to travel that same road. So that's something that's been a really personal journey for me, like kind of, and I don't, people label it things that I don't necessarily relate to. Like, people talk about it as imposter syndrome. Like, I never really related to that. It's not so much imposter syndrome to me. It's just like, I really identify with being the person fighting their way up. So when you get to the top, you're like, oh, I guess I'm here. Well, 8 lions. But, so I look forward to continuing to develop that. I really do. And actually, I will say I have executive coaching has really helped me with that, especially entering into a C-suite role. Like, I was like, nobody's going to listen to me. I'm like, these people are all really smart. Like, why would they listen to me? And like, it wasn't imposter syndrome. I genuinely meant that. I have so much respect and like love for the people on like my team, on my leadership team, my peers, like my direct reports. I'm like, they're killing it. They're great. Like, what am I going to add? So, and of course I've learned those things and have come to appreciate like that I can have my own unique brand of leadership. And I believe that I say this very often in my professional life because it is a creative field, a creative industry. I say that, you will spend your whole career really like developing your unique brand of creative collaboration. It's a career-long journey. Like, I am not the same creative collaborator today that I was 10 years ago. Like 10 years ago when I was like, I have all the answers, here's the brief. Today I'm like, I don't know. What do you think the problem is to solve? Like, much like the collecting, I've gone from being like, oh, I recognize this from this and this, to being like, why'd you make that blue? Like, just to not, like, to really be intentionally disarming with those things. So, and yeah, so I don't remember what the question was, but because this very fabulous woman just walked through it. Hi. It's like, hello.
Thank you so much for that. And the reason why I wanted you all to just reflect about what are you learning about yourself as you break barriers is because there's going to always be another one, right? Another obstacle, another risk to take. And sometimes if we can think back to the moments where we've already done it, we can use that as fuel to still push through to that next moment. Now, I do want to give you an opportunity to ask questions for Melle. So I'm going to just take a pause here and open it up.
Okay. I'm so glad you asked. I was thinking that too. Okay, so Jonathan Mannion. So he gave me this print. It was a print I saw when I met him. We were sitting next to each other on an airplane. I was terrified of flying. It was my first flight after 9/11. And he just like registered I was terrified and opened his laptop and started scrolling through pictures. And I saw this big boy print and I was like, I love that photo. A year later, I did the Milk Gallery exhibit. That photo was one of the pieces. It was huge. It was beautifully printed. Wonderful. So he gave me a small print of it that was signed with a beautiful like inscription thing that I had for like 15 years. It was at my mother's house in Maine. I told her not to keep it in the basement. I asked her not to keep it in the basement. There was a fire followed by a flood on Christmas Eve at my mother's house in Maine. It happened in the basement. Many things were lost, and that was one of them. So fast forward. Yeah, I'm like, I need to.
How much of the
I try not. Well, it's coming back though. So fast forward about maybe 6 months ago, I went to visit Jonathan. He's now at Mana in Jersey City, and he was doing he was selling a bunch of prints. And I got there. He was like, Melle, you're not going to believe what I have. And he brought the print from the Milk Gallery that was hanging on the wall, like the big, beautiful, like glass-like print of Big Boy. And he was like, I still have this. It was still wrapped in the Milk Gallery wrapping with the Milk Gallery tape on it. And he was like, this is for you.
Oh, wow.
So now if you go to my apartment, there's this huge, dope picture of Big Boy. You can only kind of tell it's him. And that's relationships. Like you said, relationships drive everything. And it meant so much to me in that moment because that's a reason I don't consider myself a collector. I didn't collect that. That person is in my life and values me, and I value him on like so many levels, including what he makes and puts in the world. So I really, really just like, yeah, it came back to relationships. That's the end of the story.
Thank you. Other question?
When you first got into like doing like strategy or like ad work, what was like your biggest hurdle?
So I've been at my agency for like 15 years. I think I just passed my 15-year mark. And it's an agency that has its roots in PR. And PR has like traditionally not been seen as the epicenter of like creative work and strategic work and like the big amazing things that, you know, at that time, like 15 years ago, were running culture from a brand perspective. Like, you know, just do it and all of that. And obviously Nike's still amazing in running it in culture, but with a different playbook, I would say. So, you know, we were always the underdog. There's a theme here. And what I found really difficult was earning respect of people who, like, every single project they worked on was a strategic creative project that would result in an asset. Like, I had to fight so hard to get a brief that was a strategic creative project that would result in an asset. Like that, but I mean, I fought and lost hundreds, thousands of battles being like, I know you asked us for a media, like a pitch list, but here's an idea. And they're like, that's great. Love the idea. We're not going to do it. Please give me your pitch list. I'm being like I'm broad strokes, right? But it took a really long time to build the relationships, the trust, the intelligence. And I mean like data intelligence, to be able to say like with confidence, like I know where culture is going. I know you think what you're doing is enough. I'm telling you it's not. And I'm telling you like, this is where culture is going. Like, this is what the people are doing and looking at. And like, you need to be there and we're already there. And like, you gotta like, come on along or you're going to get left behind. And so that was the fight. Like, and it still is. I'll be honest, it still is. You know, going up for jump balls against ad agencies, you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But I think like always wanting to go in with like the conviction, like if it was my brand, this is what I would do. So that has been the biggest hurdle, is just like earning the trust and then like building the actual portfolio to be able to get the work that you actually want to do. You know, you like just give me one or two and then I'll have the portfolio to help people trust me to do it again and again. So that's been the journey.
We might have a follow-up.
Yeah.
For creatives or people that are like working outside of the space that can potentially bring some kind of like maybe cultural capital, what would you like advise? Like, I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah.
Situation.
Okay, so I want to answer this question in two ways. First, as a brand marketer, and then as like an ARTNOIR co-founder, because they're two different, they're two like adjacent but not the same answers. So as a brand marketer, I would say that there are not a huge number of people in the world who are able to bring something unique, different, compelling, relevant, and like to life that has value and will drive people to action. If there were, everyone would do it, but there's not. So a few people do it and everyone else sells it. And like, just to like stand in that and be like, you know, like I know, like you do that, that's what you do, right? Like, and so the amount of like value there is in that is so big, and people need to look at things from different perspectives. Like, we can get very navel-gazy in our own world. I mean, like, you walk down the like Crusette too many times, you're like, oh my goodness, what? You like start to like, you're like, I'm like a world inside a world in a box in a box. everything's so self-referential. So like you need that outside perspective to actually make things good. As an Art Noir co-founder, I will say like, just like preserve your vision and your brand as, and remember that like that they need you more than you need them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Wow.
I have a question. So one of the things you said that resonated with me, and there were many things, was sort of leading really smart people and why they should why they should listen to you. One of the books I read was Why Should Anybody Be Led by You by Rob Goffey. Yeah, it's really good. What was that? Yeah. What are some of the things that have helped you kind of like see yourself as that person and kind of like incorporate some of those ideas to lead these really smart, really creative people who you look up to?
The first thing is self-awareness. I think like a problem or understood is halfway solved. So understanding that I might naturally feel like a little intimidated, or I might, naturally be like, oh, they have all the answers. Like just that awareness is actually really, really helpful for me, because I'm like, oh, like I'm doing what I naturally do. Now let me ask myself another question of, what value might I be able to add here? Or, what don't I think they're really seeing? Or like, what is making me uncomfortable in this work that I could either like let pass or pause on and articulate. So take a pause on and articulate, doing that more often than not is one. And also just stems from self-awareness, like feeling what's in my gut, like knowing like, why is something giving me pause? Why am I excited about something? The second thing is I really love the book Phil Jackson, 7 Rings, 11 Rings, however many rings he has, because he talks about leading a team of superstars and how hard it is to get like an NBA team where every single player is a superstar to actually act and work together as a team. And he talks about it as like building a circle of love or a circle of trust, and how you have to make sure those people like really genuinely deeply care about each other. So for me, it's like almost more important for my team to connect with each other than it is for them to connect with me, or equally important, I should say, like making sure that like circle of trust, because that way people will actually support each other, and they will learn from each other, and they will, do more together than they could as individuals. And then the third thing, very similar to that, when I was in boarding school for 2 years before I got kicked out, I rowed. I was a rower. That was my sport. And when you're in a boat, if you win, no one knows who pulled the hardest. If you lose, no one knows who phoned it in. Like you genuinely win and lose as a team. So when I think about my team on any given project, which isn't necessarily my org chart, but is like my creative partner, like my account lead, my, the digital team, like, whoever's coming together for that thing, I deeply believe you win or lose as a team. It's like one boat, one rhythm, one sound, all of that. And so, we can talk amongst each other about how we could improve or do better, or who really killed it. But when it comes to like anyone else, I'm like, we're a fortress, because I believe that level of protection is so critical to building trust. So you can actually take what you did and do even better next time. So those are like 3 things that have really heavily influenced me.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much. You actually asked some of the questions that I had in my notes as well, particularly around how do you overcome some of the obstacles, what happened, which really was a challenge of the early art collecting journey, right? Is where do I put it? How do I protect my work? So I learned a lot. We do have to begin to close, but as we process all of the different things we heard today, maybe even some of the things that it brought up in ourselves, I would love to just hear everyone, just 20 seconds. What's one takeaway for you? Maybe something you might do differently or think about differently as a result of this conversation. And then I'm going to leave it to Melle for some final thoughts.
I think for me, I would just like something I've been in the practice of doing, what I think even daycare, and just like asking the questions and like learning how much like knowledge you had that I didn't know. Like, cause I know you from the art side of it. And then when I knew you were coming up here, I was, like, you're doing chief strategy, and I knew about the festival. I was like, well, this is somebody that was like in the network that I could tap into for something I never expressed around New York, because there's not many people that are really doing that. So it was just like, oh, I need to like close mouths, so get fast and say, and like ask for help or support or like knowledge.
I like what you said about you said art's freedom. They're like stuck in my head. I'm like, that is like the ability to choose and buy what you want and you give it value is like so freeing. So I just want to lean into that more, like lean into that freedom. You let everyone has it.
Full.
I just wondering, my next steps to check away with the follow up with Melly, you find out how you're still nicer.
Okay.
She's not too good out there. Like hard to work out. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm not mad at that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, everything everyone else said, but I think in addition to that, a lot of times we find counsel and guidance from folks who don't look like us. So I'm just fortunate that this circle of trust or this, community gathering in this moment is being supported by, common denominated by us. And so thank you.
I'll
say, so yeah, I think what the sun is going.
It was hot over there, guys, okay? I didn't want to melt. But I will say I just took, really took away, especially with everything that's been just going on since I've been here. I love that you spoke about the value of team, and how you honor your team and how it is teamwork. There's no one person, I love that you can celebrate one person within you guys, within your group, if they just excelled and kicked butt, but, that you guys have, remain united. You have a united front. And I think that's very important in any team. You're always only as great as the weakest link. So I feel like if we're all on point, like to your point, so that's what I really took away, because I often work in very collaborative environments, and when the team's not teaming, it definitely can sabotage a lot, and then it messes with your confidence and all types of things. So and just the overall product and what we're presenting. So for me, that is definitely something that I took away, especially as I go into further partnerships and things, because being burned sometimes in collaborations and partnerships, you're a little hesitant to walk back in, but to hear that there are places and spaces where collaboration and teamwork do work is very inspiring. And so that's my takeaway.
Thank you for that. Mine, we themed this art collecting for career development. And I'm taking away so much of what you shared, particularly around relationships, not as only something I can apply with my journey and learning more about the arts and building my relationships there, but also within business and within where I want to go in my career. And I think even the length of some of the relationships you've had and how you really cultivated. So I want to spend a lot of time reflecting on that. Melle, I'm going to just kick it over to you for just a final word. Anything that you want us to take away as a result of this conversation?
Okay, thank you. I am just filled with gratitude, infinite gratitude. I mentioned this earlier, but the fact that you saw something that I don't often see or talk about, which is the link between ARTNOIR and everything I do there in terms of community building, relationship development, access, and strategy at an agency, that it's also a creative field, but I don't often make that link. So I'm filled with gratitude for you inviting me to this stage. I'm filled with gratitude that we can be doing this in the south of France. Like, I can't even believe how beautiful this villa is, this space. It's not 95 degrees out here and humid like it usually is. This is blessed. And I also just want to finish off by saying, like, I literally never thought I would be here. Like, you couldn't have told me. This isn't a dream or a vision I could have possibly had for myself, even 5 years into my career. Like, I didn't know that it existed and was a possibility. And so, tripling down on the gratitude, and thank you guys for all just being here with me and with us for this talk.
Okay.